The Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, Bauchi Zone, has rejected the student loan scheme of the federal government, noting that non-refundable grants should be given to Nigerian students instead of loans. The ASU Bauchi Zonal Coordinator, Lazarus Megoro, disclosed this while speaking at a Scholarship for Indigent Student program held at the Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University, Bauchi, on Saturday. Meanwhile, the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, have threatened to ground academic activities over the hike in school fees. With the constant review of Nigeria's national policy on education, Nigerian students are looking forward to a more improved educational system. Joining us now is Dele Ashiru, former zonal coordinator, Academic Staff Union of Universities, University of Lagos chapter, and Eddie Mbadiwe, an educationist and a former member of the Federal House of Representatives of Nigeria, who represented Idiato North, south of Imo State. Good morning and welcome to the morning show.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Well, we've been talking about student loans that President Tinubu introduced. As you say, it's not a good idea because it will only benefit few individuals who own private universities, and that in any case, under the terms of the law, the students may not be able to pay back, and that many students who do not qualify, who cannot access the loan, would probably drop out of school, and that what government should do is to provide compulsory grant. NANS is even asking for 200,000 naira bursary for Nigerian students at the tertiary level. We've tried this before in this country. We used to have a student loans board. In other parts of the world, they also give out loans, and students are required to pay back over time. How do you think this matter can be resolved? And what is the way forward for government?
Well, thank you very much. This has been a lingering matter for a long, long time. But for me, that is not even the issue. This is treating the symptoms rather than going to the root cause of this problem, which is that people must have education. Every Nigerian must have education, in my view, from birth up till SS3. When I was in Parliament, I introduced a bill to make education compulsory and mandatory. That means if you don't go to school or your parents stop you from going to school, we will arrest your parents and put them in prison. For me, that is the only way we can solve a lot of the problems we have in this country. Because if everybody has education up to a minimum level of SS3, then we can start a discussion. Right now, there's no discussion. So sometimes you give a palliative of whatever. It doesn't work. As you rightly said, we have had a student loan scheme before. I remember Professor Joe Iruku was the chairman of that. I don't know how many people could access that loan. But the more important thing is that a number of those who accessed that loan did not repay. They saw it as a government grant, and they left, and nothing happened. This doesn't happen in other parts of the world. If you take a loan to go to university, it happens in America, it happens in England. At the end of your course, when you start working, there's a certain percentage you must pay back so that others can get it. You know, so this, to me, is not even the issue. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, you talk about education and the fact that if we can have free education up onto a certain level, that would solve a lot of problems. But when we talk about that, we talk about investments in education and education financing and the cost of being able to provide free education up to that level, not just free education, but free quality education. Because I believe currently across different states, there's free education. But there's also the matter of the quality of education and the fact that education in itself is expensive. Anywhere in the world, if you're going to get education right, you're going to need to spend a lot of money. Unfortunately, that's a luxury that this particular government cannot afford, at least, with regards to the current state of the economy. What would you advise in terms of alternative sources of funding for education, even though primarily the responsibility of education should be that of the government? But in terms of alternative source of funding, especially at this time, to be able to achieve this that you have described, for not just free access to education, but access to quality education.
Yes, thank you very much. You see, if you eliminate a lot of the leakages in governance, you have to eliminate a lot of the so that you can have enough money to invest in education. UNICEF recommends that every government should commit at least 30% of their budget to education. 30%. In Nigeria today, as far as I can remember, it's only Enugu State, the government of Peter Mba, that has committed 30% in the current budget. Nobody else has done it. You see, when you give 5% to education, you cannot have quality education. It's as simple as that. That's why people go to private universities, which at the moment are well-funded. But again, this is a failure on the part of government. The University of Ibadan, which was the premier university in Nigeria, had very good quality education at all levels. And they were able to attract lecturers from all over the world. Government is not serious about education. And let me also add to what you said. Funding. Recently, we went to COPA 28 in Dubai with 400 plus delegates. 400 plus. That to me is rascality of the worst order. Is rascality on the part of government. China came with 1,400 delegates. Nigeria had 400 and something. Britain, which committed more than £2 billion to this educational investment, didn't come with anything near close to that. So what I'm saying is that we can eliminate all these things by cutting down on the cost of governance. What do we need so many ministries? Why? For goodness sake. Some of these ministries are just duplication of the others. So for me, it's creating jobs for the boys. It's not going to help us. Until we get serious with ourselves, these things will not work. Having said that also, the National Union of Nigerian Students are demanding 200,000. In the context of today's Nigeria, that is not too much, in my view. But none has to prove to all of us that they're serious. You see, the current way they operate doesn't give us hope. Let me give you one other example. There was a conference about 3 years ago to which I was invited, other people were invited, and the nonce president was invited. Can you believe we all got there, waited for him, he didn't come. The conference started, and 12 to 13 minutes after, he drove in a Range Rover. President of nonce came in a Range Rover. How can a student be riding who is funding him? Who is providing the money? I have been international vice president of nonce in my students' days in Ibadan. We didn't behave like that. In fact, we made sure that we left enough money for the next executive. So the students have to show us that they're serious, so that when they attack government programs, people can listen to them. At the moment, that doesn't happen.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll also bring Mr. Dele Ashiru into this. Mr. Ashiru, good to have you. I'd like to ask you about this refusal of some sort of this student loan. And you say it's just another way to enrich private universities. What's ASU's position on that? Let's talk about that first. And I'll come back to you, sir, by asking you that what's your take on also this refusal of ASU, as regards the student loan? Should it be student loan or student grant? That's to use Eddie Mbadiwe, but after Mr. Dele Ashiru answers.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation. Clearly, I will tell you that the idea of the student's loan is not new. And the way government is celebrating it as if something that is novel in Nigeria. I can tell you that in the 70s and early 80s, there were students' loan, and we all know how it ended up in monumental corruption. Concerning whether it should be a loan or should be a grant, societies that are giving loans to their students are today regretting that venture. You will recall very recently that even President Joe Biden of the United States of America attempted a write-off of students' loan, which, the Congress checkmated. The import of that is that even the American establishment, the American state, realizes the danger in which issuance of loans to students poses not only to the students after school, but even to the economy. And that's a society where employment is more than 75%. In Nigeria, students that have graduated several years ago are today still jobless. So where are they going to repay the loan? The position of our union is that this society, the Nigerian state, has enough money to fund public education in such a manner that the education will work for the society. The assumption of those who think that, well, why can't students get loan, is that they think that when a student is educated, it's for himself and for the family. But the reality in developing countries is that education must be treated as a public good. And there are societies the world over where education is free. I wonder why the Nigerian state is not copying that. Our union believes that apart from the fact that government should be able to fund education appropriately, what our students need is qualitative education, education that are competitive and are relevant to today's world. Not a few of our members also feel that, what is ASU's business in whether government gives loan or otherwise to students? But that is only one side of the story. The other side is that they are failing to realize the pivotal role which scholars must play in any society. And scholars in societies, intellectuals in every society, is the leading light of that society and must, chart a path for society to follow. And that is why our union feels that education, as guaranteed in our constitution, is a public good, and government must be prepared to fund it adequately.
All right. I'd like to come back to you, sir. Eddie Mbadiwe, sir. Your take on this matter. Should it be a grant or a loan?
Thank you very much. The truth of the matter is that with the current state of our economy, we cannot just give a blanket grant to everybody. It's not possible, because that will compete with other demands on the society, such as health, which is our health system at the moment is deplorable. We need to revamp it and so on. So I think I will go with a loan, but we must make sure that the loan is recoverable. That is that when you graduate, you have a grace period of maybe 2 or 3 years from which deductions will be made from your salary. You have to sign a contract to get a loan. You just don't come and take government money and go. No, I will not support that. It should be a loan for those who are qualified to get it. You know, I have said this on many occasions that where there is no vision, the people perish. If you go back in our history as Nigeria, almost everybody from the Southwest who is somebody today is a beneficiary of the universal primary education Chief Obafemi Awolowo introduced in 1955. It was that education scheme that gave them the background to advance. Many of them are now professors or retired professors. So the point is, you can cut issues in some places to make sure that education is available to everybody. Let me also give you another example. Cuba, which all of you know, has compulsory education for everybody, compulsory. That is why if you want 1,000 doctors today, I know there was a time Anambra State doctors went on strike, and Peter Obi threatened to go to Cuba and employ doctors because they were available. We have not got to that stage. And I don't want to believe that we want to deceive ourselves. We don't want to deceive ourselves. So let us start with the loan. But as I said, the root core of the problem is lack of education at the very low level. That's why people are talking about unemployment of 75%. You cannot run a country like that. You run a country for a few people. That is my take on this matter.
Well, Mr. Mbadiwe, let me start with you. When you said earlier on that there should be compulsory education up to the level of SS3, that secondary school, you didn't mention tertiary education. Are you, by any stretch of the imagination, suggesting that higher education is not necessary? That if we just have up to school cert, that is enough?
No, I did not mean that. I cannot say that because I'm a beneficiary of higher education. I have a PhD in biochemistry, and I've also been a research person. The point I make is that you cannot even go to this question of student loans if you don't have the basic education, which, for me, is necessary. That is why Beatrice Kaze, who was in the House with us, both of us drafted that bill. And that bill passed first, second, and went to public hearing before the life of the parliament expired. You see, if you equip people, then they're able to argue with you, discuss with you intelligently. Right now, it doesn't happen. What happens is that people are bamboozled and so on. Higher education is very important. You know, just last week, the Kano State government, it was on television, awarded postgraduate scholarships to anybody from Kano who had a first class. So they understand the value of education. I also do that, you know. But we've got to start from the basics. The basics are wobbly and unsound, and that's why we have all these problems.
Okay, I get your point. Dr. Ashiru, thank you for joining us. Dr. Ashiru, if you are still there. Dr. Ashiru, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Looks like we've lost connection with Dr. Ashiru there. Over to you. All
right. I mean, I really would have liked to probe a bit further. Maybe, Mr. Mbadiwe, you might want to, you can also speak to this. With regards to the grant suggestion by ASU, even though you said that you're not in alignment with that, that you'd rather the loan be given. Let's talk about the administration of this loan. I mean, we've already talked about the fact that it's not new, but how do you think it could be effectively administered so that the people most in need of it would have access to it? Transparency, what should be the criteria? You talked about 2 years post-work. A good point that Dr. Ashiru had highlighted earlier was even the lack of access to jobs. So the likelihood of the beneficiaries paying back these loans, not very certain. I believe Dr. Ashiru is back. Before I come to Mr. Mbadiwe, let me take this question to Dr. Ashiru. Dr. Ashiru, great to see you back. Now, I wanted to ask you the question with regards to this grants as opposed to loan proposed by ASU. How will this work? How will this be funded? Should this grant be given to all Nigerian students, or will there be a criteria for who will qualify for these grants, non-refundable grants that you're proposing? But the big question for a number of people is how will this be funded? And besides, government has a responsibility for basic education that is up to GSS 3, because at that point you can at least you have enough skills to either go into training. So education is a choice. That is, higher education is a choice if you want to further it and get a degree. Should that not be the responsibility of the individual who wants to take that on? I'd like you to respond to that, please, and then Mr. Mbadiwe can respond to the earlier question I'd asked.
So the last question. I'd like to say that education up to GSS 3 level is the argument put forward by the Bretton Woods institution that Africans don't need tertiary education. What you need is vocational education. And that is why today you find in most universities entrepreneurship centers in order to achieve that goal. I think that is begging the issue. The position of our union is that for developing countries like Nigeria, capacity development, human resource development, and the kind of education that is needed for development can only happen at the tertiary level. I mean, if you educate somebody up to GSS level, I mean, what is the difference between a semi-literate human being and somebody who is stark illiterate? So our own position is that education up to university level, should be funded by government. And talking about grants, the grants that we are talking about is not for selected Nigerian students. What we are proposing is that government will do a random check on how much it costs to train a doctor, to train a nurse, train an engineer, train a creative artist. And then the number of students that are admitted into those respective universities, government will remit that quantum of money to those universities in order to be able to train those students. It is not a developmental idea to abdicate government's responsibility to train its citizens to individuals. Societies where government take more than passive interest in the education of those societies are the ones making progress.
All right, Dr. Ashiru, let me ask a question. Let me come in here. Dr. Ashiru, so where will the money come from? This grant you're saying, where is the money going to come from? Is it realistic at this point in time what ASU is asking for?
Where the money that was taken to COP28, 422 people, where did the money come from? The money that was used to buy SUVs for those in the legislature, where did the money come from? The money that is using to fund the ostentatious lifestyle of the political elites in Nigeria, where is the money coming from? Look, let's not deceive ourselves. There's enough money in this country to fund education if government is serious about it. And our union have always made proposals to government as to how to fund our proposals. I give you an example. Nigeria generates trillions of naira from stamp duties. The money for stamp duties is unaccounted for by anybody. We had proposed to government that that's a money that can be channeled into funding education. If government is serious, this government will find money to fund whatever it wants to fund. And government funds everything that concerns the rich. Only the poor suffers in the hands of this government. Right. So what we are simply saying is that there's enough resources, there's enough money in this country. All we need to check is wastages, corruption, and outright theft in government. Once that is done and the political will is there, there's enough money to fund education in this country.
Well, please, I'd like you to come in, Mr. Mbadiwe, into this conversation. Do you agree with Dr. Ashiru's position that government should spend money on training Nigerians up until tertiary level, university level?
Well, for me, that's a phantom idea. Phantom in the sense that it is not practicable. The government does not have that money. We all know that. There are so many things that demand intervention from government. No. That's why I say, if you give people up to SS3, they can now branch in and become technicians, artisans, electricians. These are things we don't have. You know, we have to concentrate on this area. And then the very bright ones, not everybody. It's not everybody that will benefit from university education. Not everybody. So let us be realistic and say, let us have a loan scheme and enforce its recovery so that others can benefit. That's the point I'm making. Thank you.
Okay. You've talked about the loan scheme. You've talked about the need for grants. Let's talk about the core issues as regards the university. The universities are down as regards funding for research as we speak. Even there's a general, overarching malaise as regards the welfare of the lecturers. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Ashiru, most of the things ASU demanded that made you go on the last strike, has all those things been fulfilled by the government as we speak? That's number one for you. You go first. And afterwards, sir, I'd like to ask you, what would you now say should be a better model of looking at the educational system in Nigeria going forward to meet the present-day challenges? I'll come to you, sir, Mr. Ashiru, first.
John, I will tell you that all of the issues that led to our last strike action and all the punitive measures by the erstwhile government, none of it has been resolved as we speak. And what are the issues? We went on strike to renegotiate an agreement that we had with government 13 years ago. The implication of that is that university teachers in Nigeria, until the recent pronouncements, which is yet to materialize, have been receiving the same salary since 2009 to 2012. Even after that strike, we were told that government had budgeted money to increase salaries, to pay end academic allowances, and revitalize our universities. Up till as I am talking to you today, none of those promises have materialized from government. It has remained what it is, promissory note and news on the pages of newspapers. Secondly, when we talk about university education in Nigeria, time was when universities in Nigeria ranked tops in the Commonwealth. Today, Nigerian universities are doing well within the limits of the resources that we have, but I can say that these universities can do better if they get support from government, from well-meaning Nigerians, and from the Nigerian people. One of the challenges over the years is that the Nigerian people have abdicated the struggle for the education of Nigerians to ASU alone. This is not right, because look at what is happening now. Education is being priced out of the reach of the common man. Private universities are springing up on daily basis, and all of this talk about student loan, about funding, autonomy and all that is really to empower these private universities. And who own most of these private universities? Politicians, beneficiaries of government patronage, or faith-based, organizations. So what our union is simply saying is that if we must have a headway in the kind of university that we deserve, that we dream of, there must be increased attention to the welfare of those who teach in our universities. Today, university lecturers are the ones subsidizing university education in Nigeria. No university professor earns more than 416,000 naira in a month, in spite of all the degrees that they have, in spite of all the commitments they are expected to meet. In a few state universities, those governments have looked into the emolument of teachers and raised it almost double what federal government is paying. This is a call to federal government to revert back to the negotiating table, renegotiate the conditions of service of those who teach in federal universities, to improve quality education, and also to stem the tide of brain drain. University teachers are running out of this country in droves, and it portends danger for the future of our society. It is imperative for government to listen now that it's not too late. Any moment after now, I am afraid that it may be too late. Already doctors are leaving, wards are being closed down. The same is happening in our universities. And I think that this is a wake-up call to government to stem that tide. Now, I want to say that moving forward, if we want qualitative education in Nigeria, government must be serious about a review of the salaries and emoluments of teachers, take them out of the dreaded IPPI scheme, because that scheme will not allow a lecturer to come from Ghana here to Nigeria to teach. There is embargo on appointment of members of academic and other staff who work in the university. These are policies that are crippling our universities, and the earlier government takes decisive decision beyond sloganeering, beyond tokenism, beyond neoliberal policies and ideas, the better for the education system and the better for the Nigerian society.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dele Ashiru, and thank you very much, Dr. Eddie